Let's see if Beth or someone will, she's got, yeah, just,
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee.
no.
I bring to your attention today Senate Bill 1026.
This is it.
This is in response to a reinterpretation, I would call it, in 2005 of a long-standing code section of the Fish and Game Code. In the 60s, this section was inserted to prevent bridge construction, culvert installation, gravel mining, and other disruptive practices for stream beds, that when the stream bed would be altered in some way, that there could be some destruction and a diversion of the flows, the streams. A permit was developed. In 2005, many years later, after a long and successful use of this particular code section, the Department of Fish and Game, now Department of Fish and Wildlife, expanded fairly dramatically interpretation and the enforcement of this section. It required agricultural water right owners to obtain stream bed alteration permits for extracting water in routine ongoing practices, normal agricultural practices. It may be a bit of an exaggeration, but not quite. The setting of a siphon pipe would constitute such an alteration and require such a permit. Now, again, I'm saying that's a bit of an exaggeration, but not much. And worse, the enforcement was very heavy-handed, particularly early on. I actually have recorded testimony, video testimony by a lot of landowners of what happened. One particular memorable occasion is an official came out armed, confronting a 78-year-old woman, informing her if she didn't sign this voluntary agreement, he would arrest her. She was very permanently scarred by that experience. Myself and other elected representatives have intervened with the department over these years, trying to promote dialogue and being helpful. On one occasion, I convened a meeting in my Reading office with some of the landowners and a regional director who showed up with a burly official from his department with a loaded firearm, which the individual carries in his normal practice. But I was offended. And I said, why is this armed official here? Well, he said the landowners have been a little bit unruly. And I argued to the contrary, your officials have been way over the line. And going, and as I, in my former capacity at another agency, I know what under color of authority means. And I said, some of your officials could be prosecuted for how you've conducted yourselves. And by the way, the Highway Patrol and the Reading Police offer the security of this office. We do not need your officials to do so. It was very intimidating. But setting that aside and just using that to emphasize what has stirred up so many honest, law-abiding, and hardworking agriculturalists in California. Since then, the passions have calmed a bit. The situation is not necessarily resolved, hence the bill is before you. And the dialogue must continue. I will indicate, well, first of all, what does the bill do? It says that routine maintenance of and the repair of these facilities for diversion in the normal irrigation practices that do not substantially alter the stream beds can continue apace as they always have. It's as simple as that. And the dialogue has continued and will continue. I have found Director Bonham to be of the most, well, I would say the most reasonable director that I've dealt with over the decades. He's a problem solver, he's a reasonable person, and whatever the disposition of the bill here in committee, I'm sure he will continue to work with me, and I will continue to work with the director. The Farm Bureau of Siskiyou County did file an action. They prevailed at the local level and lost at the appeal level. I find it amusing that the appellate court cited Dr. Seuss and said that words have meaning. Well, I would remind that court that words do indeed have meaning. And in 2009, the legislature redefined, if you will, water policy in California. And this gets to the point. It redefined what we called co-equal goals. And co-equal goals said that humans had a water right. That's what co-equal goals meant in that 2009 major policy statutory change. Another part of that was that water policy in California was no longer going to be delta-centric, that there was a north and a south and an east and a west in water. Everything in water was not about the delta, and I speak as a former delta senator. But the point was that humans had a water right, and human water rights meant agriculture, which provides for human sustenance. So that gets to the point of the bill. Those diversions that do not harm the stream bed, that are reasonable, should and can continue. And that's the essence of the bill. If I may, Madam Chair, to allow our witnesses, Noel Kramers of the Farm Bureau, Rob Reeb of the Resource Conservation Districts, and Corrine Nickel-Davis, a farmer herself, to testify.
Thank you very much. 2 witnesses, 3 minutes each, so if you'd like to proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and members. Bob Reeb with Reeb Government Relations on behalf of the California Central Valley Flood Control Association. Our members partner with the state of California on levee maintenance and operations, and also as reclamation districts operate channel diversions and pipeline penetrations into the river, and they pump water out into their water rights. We think the request to allow an exception for routine maintenance and repair makes sense. It may seem like a minor request, but when we are going to engage in a maintenance or repair project, we have to fill out a 20-page application to do so. And it may seem, well, 20 pages, not that big of a deal, but some of the things that you have to do is identify project impacts. You have to identify each vegetation type that you may be disturbing or removing. You have to identify each tree species, including the number of trees, how big they are in diameter. There are requirements potentially to do biological studies and hydrological studies. So 20 pages becomes a lot of time and money and expertise that you have to retain to do this. Then the department has 30 days to determine whether your application is complete. Once that determination is achieved, the department has 60 days to determine whether they're going to grant it or not. So there's a lot of time and expertise and expenditures involved just to do routine maintenance and operations and repair. We think there's a better way, better expenditure of state time and resources and local resources, and we would therefore ask for an aye vote for the bill.
Thank you very much. Next witness, please.
Good morning. Noel Kramers of the California Farm Bureau Federation, and also the Cattlemen's Association was not able to be here this morning and asked me to voice their support as well. The 1600 program has been a long-standing program, but the department has been changing its interpretation in recent years to expand who needs to comply with that program. And we now have farmers who in the North State have been asked and required to get a 1600 agreement simply to open their head gate, which we don't think is appropriate to need to go through that process to exercise your water right that has already been approved by the state. We have farmers in drier areas or individuals in drier areas who have been asked to get a streambed alteration agreement for doing projects in a dry wash that may be flooded once every 100 years. We don't think that that is actually what the legislature meant when they said bed bank or channel. We appreciate Senator Nielsen for bringing forward this bill. We think it would clarify and simplify things for farmers throughout the state. I think it's also important to recognize that with the new interpretation that the department has of requiring 1,600 agreements for simple diversions, we think it's unlikely that they're prepared for processing all the applications that will come with that. Another piece that's important to recognize is with SB 88, the requirement that monitoring devices be put in if you're diverting more than 10 acre feet. We think that that also will likely require a 1,600 agreement. So you now have the State Water Board telling you have to put in a monitoring device, and then the department saying you have to go through this whole process to make sure that you're not impacting the stream when you do that. So we think there are numerous opportunities to improve the program and simplify the way it works for applicants without harming the resources, and we ask for your aye vote.
Thank you very much. Other witnesses in support, if you would just give your name and affiliation and position very briefly.
Good morning, I'm Corrine Davis. I'm with the Goral Ranch. We're a fourth-generation family farm up in Butte County. We're here today because we believe that Senator Nielsen's bill would greatly help our operations. And basically, our situation is that we have rights off of Butte Creek. And in the 1990s, us, along with 3 other diverters off of Butte Creek, removed 4 dams and created 1 point of diversion, which freed up 25 miles of Butte Creek for salmon flow and restoration. It's been one of the most successful salmon restorations projects in our state. And I wanted to help paint the picture for you in terms of our operations. We have adjudicated water rights off of Butte Creek, which means that they're monitored by a water master from DWR. And all the flows that we can divert off of Butte Creek when we're allowed to divert are managed already by DWR. And this policy now that's in place creates huge uncertainty for our farm. So just by flooding up and trying to farm our crop on an annual basis, we could all of a sudden be doing something illegal in a practice that we've been doing for over 100 years. It's really important to our farm and our operation to help paint the picture for you, and I would just invite any of you that would like to come up to our farm to come take a look at our fish ladder. It's a beautiful piece of restoration, and it's an exciting time coming up here because we're going to be flooding up, and you'll get to see the process. So if any of you want to come, we'd be more than happy to host you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the invitation. Name, rank, serial number, please.
Madam Chair, members, Amy Brown on behalf of the Northern California Water Association in support.
Thank you. Anyone else in support? Anyone else? Any opposition? No. Are you in support?
Yes, ma'am.
So, please give your name.
Tony Turry, Tama County Cattlemen's Association. I would just like to express our support for SB 1026.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else in support? No, who was the Northern California Water Association? That was Amy Brown?
Who is that? Northern California Water Association. Yeah, just if
Quickly, and then we're going to...
Is that water utilities or is...
Districts, landowners, and ag owners north of the Sac Valley, up to about Shasta.
Okay, all right.
Thank you. Witnesses in opposition, if you come forward.
Vivian Hellowell, Watershed Conservation Director of Pacific Coast Federation of Fishermen's Associations. This legislature had a goal to double salmon populations by the year 2000. They're still in decline and barely hanging on, endangered and threatened species. We're not allowed to fish on most of the coast, and the recovery plan for coho requires not only recovery of these species to viable populations, but also a harvestable surplus. We are so far from achieving that for the commerce of the coast. We don't think this is a good time to weaken fish and wildlife oversight of stream alteration, even though some examples are inconvenient for people who are working around the streams. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in opposition?
Sierra Club, California. In opposition, this is Eddie Moreno.
Anyone else?
You never give any detail about why they oppose.
Josh Hanthorn, Defenders of Wildlife. We apologize for not submitting a letter on this matter, but we are in opposition as well.
Well, you have you have the right of 2 witnesses at 2 minutes each. If you'd like to give a little explanation of your opposition, I think that would be appropriate.
We'll follow up with this matter.
It's not helpful to us at the moment. Do you have anything you can share? Was the letter submitted?
And we don't have any detailed
We have-
analysis about the opposition.
If I could explain.
That's fine.
Good morning again. This is Eddie Moreno on behalf of Sierra Club, California, in support. Again, we also apologize for getting our opposition.
In support or opposition?
I mean, in opposition, getting in our opposition letter late. Again, this bill attempts to provide an exemption to Section 1602 that would apply to routine maintenance, repair, and repair of facilities for in-stream agriculture irrigation diversions. Agriculture diverters should not get a special treatment under the law, whether they have rights that predate the statute or not. Simply having water rights does not give you a free pass from the application of environmental laws. This was outlined very clearly in the Siskiyou County Farm Bureau versus the Department of Fish and Wildlife decision in 2015. Simple notification is not burdensome, and the current law only applies to substantial diversions. If DFW does not determine that there is a substantial, if the diversion is substantial, nothing needs to be done. However, the Department of Fish and Wildlife still needs to be aware of all diversions to determine the cumulative effect of the diversions on fish and wildlife, especially endangered species like the coho salmon, and especially during drought years.
Thank you very much. I think that is a bit helpful. I wanted to, we'll go around. I had a couple comments that, as I sit here as the chair, or in substituting for the chair, just a couple notes from the analyses that I think do respond in part to some of the arguments by the proponents of this measure. Colleagues, on page 5 of the analysis, item 3, staff had suggested to the author staff and representatives of the California Central Valley Flood Control Association that there be a conversation with Department of Fish and Wildlife about routine maintenance of facilities and the best management practices that might be developed and that might be useful. Now, it was very clear in your introductory remarks, Senator Nielsen, that there's not been a love fest between the various powers that be and the landowners, but you did also indicate, and I think we all share that opinion, that the head of Fish and Wildlife is a very reasonable fellow, and that I would suggest, as it is suggested here, that this may be the opportunity for conversation, because existing law does have a current exemption for routine maintenance and operation of water supply, drainage, flood control, or waste treatment and disposal facilities following notification to the department, unless the work or conditions affecting fish and wildlife resources have substantially changes or have substantial changes, and those resources are adversely affected by the activity under the agreement. So there is an opportunity, I would suggest, and I think that are suggested by staff and the chair, to have those conversations, because the court in its ruling was actually quite clear, and I think some of us have no problem citing to Dr. Seuss. I meant what I said, and I said what I meant, I think was the quote that they used referring to the legislative intent here. And I think it's quite clear. And the argument presented by one of the witnesses that the court didn't accept the Farm Bureau view that the Department of Fish and Wildlife actually abruptly changed its policy and began enforcing Section 1602 in a way that had never been done before. And even if that were the case, as is pointed out here, we are in a drought situation, and so things have changed somewhat dramatically. So I just wanted to share those comments with you and with the members of the audience, and I personally tend to agree that there is an existing exemption. The coho have not come back. This is particularly in Siskiyou County. There's been a real problem, and that while there may have been some hostilities in the past, and there certainly sound like there were, this is a new day and a new director of Department of Fish and Wildlife who might be far more amenable to working with the community. With that, Senator Waso, you had a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm sympathetic to your effort. I've seen some of the documents prepared in concert with some of the modifications that have been made to streams, and they weren't really modifications. They were just some improvements along the streams. I also understand that streams are always naturally changing. A weather event could really change the flows drastically. But I'm also very cautious because I'm very concerned that this could be a license just to go into a stream bed and make changes that will affect the wildlife, could potentially affect the wildlife in a major way. So I think that the key issue here is the word substantial alteration. And we are talking about words that do matter in the court of law. What is a substantial alteration? Could you give me a definition of a project as one that would fit along maybe the gray area of what this law could potentially affect? What kind of actual improvements are we talking about versus ones that would require what is lengthy documentation, studies, explanations, detailed information, versus one that wouldn't? What would be the change?
Well, and I can have Mr. Reeb comment too, but I would argue the normal agricultural practices of simply diverting water for irrigation would not constitute a major alteration. If you're,
the question is, how much water are we talking about? Because removing a substantial amount of water from a stream bed could really hurt the flow of the stream bed and the migratory pattern.
Well, again, substantial would be over a prolonged period of time and many dozens of acre feet. We're not talking about floods.
A prolonged period of time is what?
Well, I would say for the course of a year and a half or so of constant diversion. Understand, and you made the point, our whole valleys of California have been altered over the decades, over the eons, by the natural ebb and flow. What you would say if you're going to get down into those stream beds with major dozers, and then there's a consideration. If you're trying to move a lot of gravel out, I argue that we should have permits, and we do now have to do that. Mr. Reeb?
Well, Senator, or Madam Chair and Senator Way, so every project that is undertaken now within the stream bank and channel requires a stream bed alteration agreement. Two of the type of projects that we're interested in seeing exempted from that process, for example, if you have an 8-inch pipe that goes from the top of the levee down into the river and a pump on top for diverting water, those pipe, some of them are iron ductile pipe that's been there for 40 or 50 years, 60 years, and they rust and they fail. So taking that pipe out and putting a new pipe in would be the type of project that we think is kind of a no harm, no foul. You're not changing the operations or really impacting the resource. Another one that we come up against every year in a particular year like this is the river runs high. It pushes sediment up and it blocks the entrance to the diversion canal or drainage canal. And sometimes these are as wide as this table, maybe wider in other instances, where we'd like to be able to take that gravel and sediment out without having to go through this alteration agreement process. Those are two of the projects that our membership normally gets involved in.
I might indicate that there already is an exemption for flood control and water supply. And if you check in the analysis, again, I cited that section on page 5.
Could you respond?
Are we talking about a CEQA exemption? I know there's a CEQA exemption for that.
1602 exemption. There is a 1602 exemption.
I'm not aware of the exemptions. I'm aware of the two types of forms that you have to fill out, and even for routine maintenance, which is an attachment to this, you have to go through the process.
All right, any other, we have Senator Vidak, followed by Senator Allen. Senator Vidak.
I think this makes perfect sense in a maintenance. I mean, the description you just gave us, and then talking about head gates, and obviously I think there is a problem. All this water is highly regulated, and it's not being diverted without the proper permits. And this is actually something that needs to be done because it'll actually make the water be more efficient. When you do the maintenance and you're able to capture and even using the pumps less and whatever you happen to be doing. So I think this is a great idea, and I do invite all of you to actually come up and see this type of operation if you've never seen it, because it needs to be done, and I think it's a great bill, and I'd like to move it. Thanks.
Thank you. At the appropriate time, we will note the motion by Senator Vidak. Senator Allen.
Okay. I just want to get a better understanding of the state of play between the committee and the author and the sponsors. It seems that the folks are on a different page about a couple key facts, whether it be exemptions or other issues. Some of the things that you raised seem very reasonable to me, and I don't see why we can't get something worked out. But I'm getting the sense that the conversations, certainly with the DWP and the DFW and also the committee, are not fully baked. So I just want to get a better understanding of the state of conversation about this bill. I understand the chair's recommending a no vote. Maybe, there needs to be some further conversation with the committee so we can work out some of these discrepancies.
Well, Senator Allen, this has gone on since 2005 when this new policy was implemented by Department of Fish and Wildlife that provoked it. And as I would state, that's my position and the position of hundreds and hundreds of people that I represent some, and some I don't represent, other members of the legislature do. It was a pretty heavy-handed way of doing business. Sadly, a pretty typical way that government does business. It didn't start off very well. That said, in my introductory comments, I made mention that there have been productive conversations. Early ones not so much so, including that one in my Reading office, but even that ended positive after a while. And those conversations continue. No matter what happens in this committee, those conversations will continue. This problem will remain, and we're going to continue to work. I will continue to work, and my colleagues who represent people who are concerned will continue to work. And it is my opinion that this director will continue to work in good faith with us. So that's the positive, no matter what happens in this committee. The issue is not going to go away, and the resolve will not diminish, and I believe the dialogue will continue.
Okay, so my tendency right now is to not support it today, but that I do get the sense from reading the analysis and hearing some of the discussion that there may be several things in this bill that that the chair might be comfortable with, and that the majority might be comfortable with. So I encourage you to, regardless of what happens today, to continue working with the committee on this and see where you can go.
Sure.
Any other questions? All right, we do have a motion. Senator Nielsen, would you like to close?
Sure. And Madam Chair, I want to thank you very much for allowing Ms. Nichols Davis to elaborate just a little bit. Their farming operation is really great stewards, and she got to offer just a little bit more. So thank you for being a little generous to her.
We always like to hear about the great stewards, and we appreciate that.
Surely they are, and there's a bright side to all things, and our dialogue will continue. A couple of observations. One, the salmon situation, yes, it's always difficult, and I've represented a good part of the Sacramento River and its watershed. In fact, most of it. And in the former terms in the Senate, I did something called Senate Bill 1086, which was a management plan for the Sacramento River, something and it wasn't a governmental agency, but it's something called the Sacramento River Conservation Forum, was created. Its singular greatest accomplishments, it's still around. and it was a formal body whereby local government and the agencies of government and landowners meet regularly to discuss how we deal with issues of the Sacramento River. And once upon a time, a few years ago, Zeke Grader, who was one of the great champions of salmon of all time, said that 1086 was the best thing that ever happened for salmon on the Sacramento River. I'm humbled by somebody of his esteem that would make that observation, and I don't know if it's overblown or not, because we still have problems with salmon. But what it was a problem-solving mechanism to have diverse parties that used to be just warring with each other sit around and have good, substantial dialogue. In fact, CalFed was modeled on SB 1086. So some good things can happen. And this is just a wary warning about streambed alteration. This is actually going to be riverbed alteration, because there's going to be possibly the removal of 4 dams on the Klamath River. And when that happens, the unleashing of the flows and the siltation behind those dams is going to be alteration of unprecedented magnitude. And the enthusiasm with which that dam removal is being promoted, I think, is ignoring the impacts. That's got nothing to do with this bill. But, well, it does in a way, because it shows what alteration can mean, and in this case, well, willful human alteration of a magnitude far beyond whatever this is going to amount to. I thank the committee for considering the bill today and to hearing the arguments, and I feel that as a representative, I'm the voice of a lot of these individuals affected. And that's why we're before you here today, Madam Chair. And we will continue the dialogue no matter what the disposition of the committee today. Thank you for your time.
Very good, and thank you, Senator Nielsen. With that, the motion is due pass to appropriations. The chair, Senator Hueso, any final word, please?
Madam Chair, I just want to explain my vote. I'm concerned about this bill, as Senator Allen is, but I want to encourage the author to continue to work with the chair on ironing out the definitions. I think the devil's in the details and allowing this to happen. I'll feel more comfortable voting for this with those issues we're working out, but I'm going to vote yes today to support that effort and allow the senator to continue to work on this issue.
Thank you, Mr. Senator Hueso, and that's my pledge to the committee.
All right, with that, there is a recommendation from the chair for a no vote. And with that, we have a due pass to appropriations. Please call the roll.
Senators Pavley, Stone, Allen, Hertzberg, Hueso. Hueso, aye. Jackson?
No.
Jackson, no. Monning? Monning, no. Vidak? Wolk? Wolk, no.
All right, that the vote count is 1 aye, 3 noes. We will put that matter on call. Thank you, Senator.